Good morning. It is Sunday, June the 5th, about 9:30 a.m. This is Shay Gibson with Weather Flow and Wind Alert, bringing you another tropics update as we continue to monitor an area of disturbance over the Yucatan Peninsula known as Invest 93L. The National Hurricane Center is now giving this a 90% chance for development in the next 48 hours and 90% chance next 5 days. So we may see Tropical Storm Colin very soon. Let's look at the visible satellite imagery, and we see an explosion of convective activity along the eastern side of the system. The low was here, and I believe it's transferred out here now. We're starting to see a little bit of a surface low develop off the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, one other factor that we need to be looking at is this trough right here that is cutting down across the Gulf of Mexico. That's going to be with this system its entirety along the western and northwestern side. We talked about this in our last tropical update, that this upper level shear tears the cloud tops off of any kind of deepening convection and cloud top build, so vertical stacking will be limited along this zone of the system. However, along this area, along the eastern, southeast, and northeastern quadrant of this low, the convective activities are more conducive for firing off and keeping the convection kind of wrapping towards the core of the system. In time, it may end up being kind of an asymmetrical low or an asymmetrical tropical storm by the time it wobbles up into the northern Florida coast. But what we do have to watch is for this convective activity to really hammer into this area of the Florida coast along the eastern flank. So let's take a look at the rainbow imagery, and we see this explosion of activity here. We have 30 degrees Celsius water temperatures in that area right now where that convection is. That's 86 degrees, so the water is primed for instability and convection at this point. If we look at the sea surface temperatures for the Gulf of Mexico, we see that water temperature here, 86, is pretty consistent all the way up. So that's why the eastern side of the system is going to be the most conducive for convective activity. We're going to be getting a lot of fueling from the surface from this unstable or this warmer unstable water to provide more instability to the system and convection. Now here, let's take a look at Datascope and see what the winds are doing in the area. We don't have many reliable data points. We have these here along land, which are land shadowed, so we don't have very good observations going on here. But out here near, closer to that convective feed, we have 29 miles an hour, so we're averaging about 30 miles an hour for the system along the eastern side already. And we've had a couple of spikes. We had 44 miles an hour at 6 a.m. We had another little spike about 7:20 at about 41 miles an hour. So we're seeing some higher winds in association with this convective blob here to the east of the system already. So that just kind of tells us once it gets over the warmer waters of the Gulf of Mexico and develops a closed low, that the wind field will start to grow around it. Let's take a look at the tracks now. The berth for these tracks has shrunk a little bit. It was a little bit wider last night. Now things are starting to tighten up as most models are in agreement with this to head off to the northeast. We can't exclude this one out here. There's a cold front heading towards the east coast that may draw the system a little further north than these tracks, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Nothing is for certain, and we're still a couple days out here, so we may have to take this one pretty much in 12-hour to 24-hour increments to find out exactly what the track is going to be as we watch that upper trough drive and steer it. So here is our model intensity guidance. We have some that are high up into the upper category 1 and then some that are lower. The spread is pretty wide for this. There's a lot of disagreement. However, most of the agreement is that it will become a tropical storm of a moderate intensity. Let's look at the WPC for the system pattern and see what's going to be going on ahead of it. So as we go in time, we see a cold front approaching the coast by Monday morning. And then here comes the low up from the Gulf of Mexico, and then we see the cold front stall over the Appalachian Mountains. This cold front could draw this system up along the western, or not the western, more the central panhandle area of Florida. So we still have to watch for this guidance here. As we go in time, though, we see that another cold front drops down quickly behind that, and by Wednesday morning or Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, it sweeps whatever is left out into the Atlantic Ocean. So even if we have a land crossing here, this cold front is going to pull it very quickly to the east-northeast and then out to the Atlantic and then pull it away from the coastline very quick. So the more of a northerly track it takes, the heavier the rain banding and the more convective activity is going to be hitting in this area, probably Tampa Bay and northward, maybe even Sarasota and northward. But the Carolinas now need to be on the watch for this. Jacksonville, Florida, Carolina, South Carolina coast, Georgia coast need to be watching because heavy rains could be associated with that more northerly track. Let's take a look at the numerical guidance from GFS, and we can run this forward in time. And we see here comes the low, and you see all the convective activity feeding into the western Florida area, especially the Tampa Bay area northward, and then here it comes across Florida and in time gets pulled out into the Atlantic. and moves on out to the coast, or moves off the coastline and then out to sea. So we still have to keep an eye for heavy rain banding to affect parts of the Carolinas, as you see there, southeast North Carolina. And this is getting pretty far out, so nothing's for certain there. But that is the GFS. Here comes the Euro. Let me let this one load. And here comes the low. Now this one takes a little bit more of a northerly track, so that's where the cold front will be coming across right about at this time. And then the cold front quickly moves across this way and pulls it out to sea. And if we see on the next frame here with the low, and to keep in mind this area of convection, the Euro is in agreement with that as well. Even the pressure is pretty much in agreement with the GFS, 1002 millibars. That means it could be tropical storm status at that point. But as we go in time, we see that low. We move this one more tick forward, and we see the low quickly race off to the northeast by Tuesday night, or Tuesday morning. So that's kind of the gist for the Euro and the GFS. Now, if we look at numerical guidance here from the HRRR 3 kilometer, I like to use this one for precipitation. And we're going to see that South Florida and Central Florida is going to already start seeing some effects as that moisture lifts up from the Western Caribbean Sea and up across Florida, the Keys, and up into central and northern Florida. So we're already seeing that rain banding and storm lines developing along South Florida in association with the system as that moisture lifts up to the east and the northeast of the system. All right, let's take a look at the 24-hour rainfall. It looks like most of the concentrated rainfall will remain offshore, but we do have to keep an eye for some heavier pockets here and there. And this is just in association with storm lines. Sea breezing could be assisting this when you have Bermuda High out here with an easterly wind. So some of these heavier pockets of rain here in central Florida aren't associated with that. They're just where the sea breeze front converges along the inland locales with heating. But this area, this blob right here, is going to be heading towards the coast, and we see that if we look at the 5-day spread from the WPC, and we see the rain intensities start to climb. So the WPC has been a little bit up and down with this. The other day they had 7 to 8 inches. Now they're showing 6.6, but this could change. The main thing here is that heavy rains are going to be affecting Florida, and we really need to be on the watch for that. And the swath of general heavier rains are going to be cutting through this direction out into the Atlantic. Now, parts of the Carolinas are starting to be brought into some of these heavier rains, maybe 3 to 4 inches. So be on the lookout for that if you do live along the northern Florida, on the Atlantic side, Georgia and South Carolina coast, even southeast North Carolina. This system takes more of a northerly track. You could be seeing effects from rip currents, heavy rains, squalls, possible storms. Now, one thing I definitely wanted to talk about, if we look at the Tampa Bay area, I wanted to show you something here because there is the threat for potential flooding. Now, if we look at Egmont Channel right now, the winds are showing more of a east-southeast flow, but in time, if we look at the modeling for this, we see GFS is building these winds as we get into Monday. Look at the timing of this. Let me blow this up one more time. The timing of this for Monday shows a southeast wind and then eventually becoming south by 2 p.m. and more of a south-southwest by 5 p.m. The wind's driving at about 30 to 34 miles an hour with gusts up into the upper 40s. The GFS is not perfect, but we do know that the southerly winds along these banding and these areas of convection will be driving the winds up and driving water into the coastline. So if we look at the NAM 12, we even see a little bit more agreement there with 30 to 31 and gusting into the upper 40s as well by late afternoon Monday. Now, right now we're in king tide mode where the Earth and the Moon are closest together and the Earth and the Sun are closest together. We call that the perigee and the perihelion, and it brings us king tides at this time of the month. Yesterday peaked out for the king tide, but we still have king tides going through Monday, so we're still in the last leg of king tide, and that's going to be significant for the St. Petersburg area. If we look at the extratropical storm surge model, this is just a forecast. You can see the actual tide prediction being here at about 1.5 feet, and then the actual total water guidance for the surge being up around 4, almost 4.5 feet. So we're talking 2 to 2.5 foot difference here for prediction guidance. So we're looking at a higher storm surge by 2.5 feet or so for the Tampa Bay area. And if we look at Tampa Bay, we see that when we have more of a south-southwest wind, we have driving water. So if you live in the northern Tampa Bay area, you really need to be watching this. Or if you live anywhere where there's water, large bodies of water that could be piled up by 30 to 47 mile an hour winds, or even higher than that during some of these squalls, you could be in a pretty bad flooding situation. So be on the alert for that. If you live along the northern Tampa Bay slots or any of these other areas, that flooding is going to be a major concern because you're going to have driving winds. You already have king tides peaking out at that time in the afternoon. So we're looking at a very high table. This is not an actual solid prediction, but this is definite guidance, and it's been doing pretty good the last couple of days as we see the values have actually come up over what was predicted. So we're looking at meeting these values. We'll be observing this one today, and if it meets these values, then we know that we may have an increased potential chance for some serious flooding in this area. We're talking very, very high astronomical tide levels during this storm. So not good timing for the system to hit during a king tide in these low-lying areas. So be on the lookout for that, and that's going to do it for the tropical update for this time. And until then, stay safe. I'll be back on maybe tonight if things develop and we see a close low and things are starting to progress a little bit faster. I'll come back on tonight and do another update. And until then, take care and thanks for watching.